Hey guys, welcome back. It's Lucky here, and it's that time of the year where we look at the MMO genre and go over the most played MMOs right now. A lot has changed since I last made this video. We've seen some MMOs move way up on the list, and we've seen some move way down. This video is strictly by the numbers, which means I'm not ranking them by quality, simply by active player base size. Which MMOs are dying and which ones are thriving? Let's find out. First up at number 17 is Albion Online. Released in 2017 and currently available on PC, Mac, iOS, and Android. Albion Online has fallen to number 17 on this list, moving down 6 spots, partly because I've included some new MMOs this time around, and partly because it has seen a drop in its population since its peak. Albion Online is not for the faint of heart. It's a full loot PvP MMO. This game does allow you to pay for power. The silver lining is that because it is full loot, that means you can let someone else pay to win and then kill them and take their gear. Fortunately, if you lose a full loot PvP fight, it's not too terribly difficult to recover from. Most players are running around with gear that's worth only about 1% of their net worth. Once you've been looted by an enemy, you can buy replacement gear with a click of a single button. The game features a pretty massive progression tree where the more you use something, the more you level it up and unlock things down that branch of the tree. Albion Online does not require a mandatory sub, however, it does offer an optional sub that will greatly reduce the grind towards max level. The game has attracted a niche audience, helping it make it onto this list. If you're looking for something different and high stakes that feels like a MOBA and an MMO merged into one beautiful creature, Albion Online might be a great choice for you. Falling further than any other MMO on this list is Lost Ark, dropping 10 places all the way down to number 16. Lost Ark was falling before Throne and Liberty came out, and I think the audience overlap with Throne and Liberty just accelerated that downtrend. Lost Ark is a free-to-play, top-down MMORPG that launched in the East in 2019 and then finally here in the West in 2022. Lost Ark is Diablo meets Final Fantasy meets a Las Vegas casino. It has a cash shop and gear progression system that'll frequently remind you of its Eastern MMO roots. The game is absolutely pay to win, or if you prefer, you can call it pay for power, but to its credit, it's also one of the few major MMOs that you can choose to play for completely free. And I'm not talking about those MMOs where you can try it for free. You can legitimately access and play the entire game for free if you have the patience and the determination to push through the monetization of this game. The ultimate goal of Lost Ark is to sail around the world, collect all the things, and increase your character's power. The sailing is a lot of fun, especially early on when you first access it. The weaknesses of Lost Ark are the pay to win monetization and the rampant botting. One of Lost Ark's biggest strengths is its combat, as a lot of players will tell you that the combat is extremely satisfying. On top of that, the game has a wide variety of classes with more on the way, each with their own look and feel to make sure anyone can find the right class for them. If we look at Lost Ark's trends, we can see that interest in Lost Ark exploded in February of 2022, but then quickly lost players as time went on, leaving it all the way down here at number 16 on the list today. Now, you know that feeling of being overpowered when you start a game, just stomping on enemies one after another? You can experience that for a limited time if you take advantage of today's offer. Right now, you can get legendary champion Alice the Wanderer for free, along with a bunch of rewards, simply by opening raid on 14 different days. You get Alice the Wanderer on day 7 and a 2-star perfect soul for her on day 14. You can get Alice this way until March 26th. More OP than starting your journey with one legendary champion is starting it with 2. Complete the Mad Hatter Fusion event to get the legendary champion Mad Hatter. Take part in the event until January 23rd to add him to your collection. Now, legendary champions need amazing gear, so jump into the event dungeon where the Queen of Hearts has made her home and collect awesome rewards like the exclusive pinpoint gear set anytime before March 5th. Be sure to click my link in the description or scan my QR code to get 2 epic heroes available only via my link, and to get a huge starter pack in Epic Champion Ultimate Galek from the Orc faction. Once you hit level 15, you get another starter pack that includes Epic Champion Fayne. And remember, these 2 champions are available only after downloading via my custom link or my QR code. But the good news doesn't stop there, it gets even better. You can get a 3rd legendary champion using promo code Monkey King to get the absolutely insane Sun Wukong for free. This promo code is available till February 7th, so be fast. Between that and your other 2 legendary champions, Alice the Wanderer and the Mad Hatter, you're set up to have the funnest start possible in Raid Shadow Legends. So join my clan, Vegeta Best Arc 888, and I'll see you on the battlefield. Thank you, Plarium, for sponsoring this video. Dropping 1 spot to number 15 is EVE Online, which continues to fall down the list. Released all the way back in 2003, but still being actively supported by its developers and its fans. EVE Online is available on PC, Linux, and Mac OS. Now, is the game just getting old, or is having the most expensive expensive sub in the genre at $20 per month, starting to catch up with it. EVE Online is an MMO where your goal is to build and upgrade a powerful spaceship so that you can join up with others to vie for control of the most profitable sectors of space. It's free to play with the option to spend money to do things like access more of your spaceships sooner. It also has an optional sub, and as mentioned, this sub is the most expensive subscription on the entire list today, sitting at $20 a month. As with most optional subs, fans of the game will tell you that if you fully intend to enjoy the game, the sub isn't so optional. PvP in EVE Online is high stakes, as when your ship is destroyed, it does not simply respawn. Nope, you're gonna have to rebuild it again. The many hours, days, and months worth of materials that you put into that ship are now gone, but its fans and its developers have kept it on this list for over 2 decades, so there's definitely something special about it. Next up, we have Lord of the Rings Online, moving up 3 places to number 14, partly because it's seen an increase in interest, and partly because other MMOs on this list have fallen so far. It was released in 2007, and then in 2010, it went from being a subscription-based MMO to a free-to-play one. Lord of the Rings Online is a classic theme park MMO. It's got a respectable Lord of the Rings-inspired story with some really solid voice acting. Like many of the free-to-play MMOs, it's not massively popular, but it's alive enough to enjoy it. It's worth noting that in order to have access to all of the races and all of the classes, you'll have to spend some money. You can also choose to sub for $15 a month in order to get things like extra inventory space or extra quests. If you want a fun little trip down nostalgia lane and a classic MMO experience that you can enjoy without spending a dime, maybe try Lord of the Rings Online. Next up, sitting at number 13, is the oldest MMO we'll talk about today, launched all the way back in 1999, and that's EVERQUEST. EVERQUEST has moved up 3 places on this list, thanks to some other MMOs falling down so far. EVERQUEST has a small but respectable population. Before WoW, when no one else knew what an MMO was, there was EVERQUEST. This game has the classic MMO formula, because it invented a lot of it. EVERQUEST can be punishing. Dying can mean you have to go back and pick up your corpse to get your gear back. Pulling an extra mob can spell your death. EVERQUEST is still getting expansions today, which is why it's still sitting here at number 13 on the list. Now for the next one, I really expected Throne and Liberty to do better than this. This is a brand new MMO from a massive AAA company, 12 years in development, sitting all the way down here at number 12. It's difficult to put into words how poorly this MMO has performed relative to the effort that was put into it, but I saw this coming a mile away. It's a PvP-centric MMO with very little PvE. Combine that with the fact that it's got massive pay to win, and you have the recipe for a quick cash grab, not a long-lasting, thriving MMO. For example, the in-game auction house, where you buy your weapons and armor from other players, literally uses cash shop currency. There's only one way for this cash shop currency to get into the game. That's for another player, likely a whale, to buy it with cash from NCSoft. This means that normal players have to play the game like a job to try and keep up with the 30-second credit card swipes of the whales. I really wanted Throne and Liberty to be a good game. I did, but when they unveiled the monetization of this game, I lost all interest. And tragically, it looks like so did everyone else, as it sits here at number 12 on the list as a brand new MMO with its population only shrinking by the day. Here's hoping they can fix the monetization and turn it around someday. If you're enjoying this video, be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks. Now let's get back to it. Next up, climbing 2 slots to number 11 is Star Wars: The Old Republic. This is another one where the population isn't growing. The other MMOs around it just did so bad that it went up 2 spots. Although it did see a nice bump in its population at the beginning of 2025. Now, BioWare has handed off this MMO to a new developer to keep it up and running as they move on to new projects. Typically, this doesn't bode well for the future of an MMO, but time will tell. This is another MMO that is now free to play with an optional sub. That optional sub will unlock a lot of things, but most importantly, it'll give you access to every zone in the game forever, even if you only sub for 1 month and then cancel. Veterans of the game will tell you that if you actually want to experience SWTOR, that's exactly what you'll need to do. Star Wars: The Old Republic is most known for its amazing class stories that immerse you in the Star Wars world, which are fully voice acted and are incredibly well fleshed out and written. Perhaps the most unique part of these stories is that your choices actually have an impact on the ending of your story, with up to 3 different endings possible for each class. This is definitely one of the coolest parts about SWTOR. It's not a bad game to pick up and play with a friend, as it does feature level scaling, which has resulted in the questing experience being very, very easy. So you'd definitely be jumping into it for the story rather than the challenge. The population has been sliding over the years, albeit slowly, but now that the developer has given the game away, its future has never been more uncertain. Now for the top 10 most played MMOs of 2025. Falling to the 10th place from the number 4th slot is MapleStory. Some of the recent headlines for this game may be catching up with it. Apparently, MapleStory was lying to its players about drop rates for items they were spending real money to gamble for. The developer developer was ultimately fined $9 million, but seeing as this is a drop in the bucket compared to what they made off of those microtransactions, this was likely more of a signal for them to repeat this behavior than to avoid it. MapleStory launched in 2003 in the East and then 2005 in the West. It has been immensely successful and still manages to stay relevant nearly 2 decades later. So far, the game has reached over 260 million registered users worldwide and grossed over $3 billion in lifetime revenue. To put that into perspective, there's only one MMO that beats that, and that's World of Warcraft. It's got over 40 different classes for you to try and offers an incredibly unique and accessible experience. This is because it runs on a toaster and it's got 2 decades worth of content, so there's plenty to do. How do the charts look? Well, it's a long way from its early 2000s peak, but it's still doing well enough to stay in the top 10. Next up, we have Black Desert Online, released in 2015. Falling 4 places from the last time I made this list, Black Desert Online is known for its beautiful graphics and flashy combat. It's an open world game with very little in the way of instance combat. You don't play BDO for dungeons and raids, you play BDO to kill things in the open world, often for hours just to gain a few % of a level. It's very much a grindy game, and it's important to note that this is an always-on PvP game. Once you hit 50, the PvP is on. For the most part, anyone can kill you at any time. This doesn't mean they will, but it's definitely one of the unique qualities about the game that makes it popular among PvPers. BDO has earned some pretty negative associations here in the West, thanks to its previous publisher making the game overly pay to win, with some pretty heavy-handed monetization on top of that. But since then, the developer parted ways with that publisher, and the game has undone a lot of those less popular aspects of its monetization, making it possibly worth looking into again if you haven't recently. BDO features a ton of unique classes and continues to actively update the game. But how is the population of the game trending as of late? The population is definitely trending down since its last expansion, as most MMOs do, but they seem to have largely stopped the bleeding of their player base. Recent expansions have added a lot of questing and PvE content if you're someone who prefers that type of content. Holding on to the number 8 slot is Guild Wars 2, which released in 2012 on PC. Guild Wars had an explosive launch back in 2012 and has been one of the most popular MMOs on the market since. As MMOs go, Guild Wars does an excellent job of encouraging zone exploration and completion, and tried hard to break the mold of having players run from one yellow exclamation point to the next, and it largely succeeded in these efforts. If you try it out, you'll see what I mean. It's a very unique questing experience. I highly recommend it. Guild Wars 2 features a very generous free trial. The first 80 levels are free, and the game does not feature a sub, not even one of those quote-unquote optional subs. So when it says you can play it for free, it means it. After the first 80 levels, there is a lot of great content to be had in the expansions. However, these will need to be purchased, and these expansions definitely house the best content in the game. Guild Wars 2 mounts are better and more fun than mounts in any other game, but its lack of a rigid trinity of tank, healer, and DPS have definitely hurt the mass appeal of the game. One of the most memorable parts of Guild Wars 2 is its world events, where upwards of 100 players group up to take down dragons the size of skyscrapers. These fights are truly a sight to behold, and it's really cool to see that many people in the community all get together to take these things down. How's Guild Wars trending? It seems to have seen a peak with its End of Dragons expansion in 2022 that its population has been tapering off from since. Guild Wars 3 was mentioned in a shareholder meeting, and it's very possible the developers have started work on it. Next up, climbing 5 spots on this list, is Wizard 101, moving from number 12 to number 7. This is another kids MMO that was a gateway into the MMO scene for many children around 2008 when it launched. It's still going strong today and still getting new updates regularly. The game lists itself as free to play, but veterans of the game will tell you that it's more honest to call it free to try, as you'll need to sub in order to access all of the game's best and most relevant content. It's definitely a unique entry, featuring a card collecting style of combat. It also includes your more usual MMO staples like housing and fishing. And despite its humble beginnings, it's still here, comfortably holding down the number 7th spot 16 years after its release. Next up, we have New World, who is one of the most improved MMOs on this list, seeing itself climb an impressive 9 places on this list from number 15 to number 6. Its PC population has only seen marginal growth, but the game is also available on consoles now, helping to drive new players into the game. As far as MMOs go, New World is one of the most fairly monetized ones out there, featuring very little in the way of things that could be considered pay to win. This game is buy to play with an optional battle pass. New World features a massive, seamless open world for you to explore, and that's where this game really shines. It shines when you're out exploring, questing, killing, and gathering all the things you stumble into along the way. Every tree, bush, or rock can be gathered to level up your crafting and gathering. New World features the trinity of tank, healer, and DPS, and has some some incredibly challenging dungeons and raids. New World always felt like a game that would be well suited on console, so I'm surprised it took this long. It looks like the developers sacrificed a lot of PC's player count to get there, but hopefully this gamble pays off for them in the long run and they're able to get them back. Next up, we have Elder Scrolls Online, which has benefited from some other MMOs on this list falling a few places. Moving up from number 7 to number 5. Elder Scrolls Online just announced it would no longer be following its annual chapter expansion model, instead opting for seasons. This is happening not long after this MMO moved away from its Q4 Zone DLC and Q3 dungeon packs. The developers say this is to facilitate the creation of more varied content, but it's definitely a surprising move. ESO features 12-player raids and 4-player dungeons, as well as a ton of single-player content for you to enjoy. There are 3 tiers of difficulty for those types of content, allowing players to push themselves farther and farther. It definitely leans toward the casual MMO player and stands out as one of the more story-driven MMO experiences out there. ESO is buy to play with an optional sub, so if you want, you can pick up the base game and get hundreds of hours of content out of it, and if you enjoy that, the subscription will unlock the other half of the game for you. Elder Scrolls Online features action combat, so if you're used to tab targeting MMOs, it's going to take a little bit of time to get used to this game's combat. If we look at the chart, ESO does seem to be having a difficult time stopping a pretty rough player-based slide, which might have contributed to their decision to move away from their annual expansion model. Next up, falling 3 places from a brief stint at number 1 down to number 4 is Final Fantasy XIV. This is the lowest I've seen Final Fantasy XIV since I started making this list 4 years ago. I attribute this fall to 2 things. The first is a larger than normal fall off of players from Final Fantasy XIV's newest chapter, Dawn Trail. And the second is the massive influx of players that the number 3 game on this list received. Final Fantasy XIV continues to be an example of what happens when you monetize your MMO fairly, as it continues to be massively successful. Final Fantasy XIV is a fantasy MMORPG that places a focus on the story. The single-player story content comes first, and every piece of content that follows it is built in service to that end. The dungeons are unlocked as part of the story. The trials are unlocked by and woven into the story. Some of the most memorable cutscenes in the game are delivered in the middle of a trial while you're fighting for your life. It also features 22 different classes and the trinity of tank, healer, and DPS. Final Fantasy XIV has a best-in-class free trial, now allowing you to play the first 70 levels and the first 2 expansions for completely free. After that, you'll have to buy the game and pay the mandatory sub. Thanks to this mandatory sub, however, the game is free of pay to win. It's free of loot crates, and it has hundreds of cosmetics and mounts that you can earn in-game by playing the game. If we look at the charts, you can see a normal drop in interest since it launched its expansion, coupled with the dramatic increase in interest in the next game on this list. Bouncing back from its previous low on this list is WoW Classic, which has jumped from number 10 on this list to an impressive number 3. And this all thanks to 2 things. One is the launch of Fresh Classic, and 2, OnlyFans. OnlyFans is the best thing to happen to WoW since Bobby Kotick was fired by Microsoft. OnlyFans is a guild that consists of many of the biggest streamers on Twitch and has given these new servers more attention than any advertising campaign could ask for. Back in March of 2017, Blizzard finally caved and announced that they would be making World of Warcraft Classic. World of Warcraft Classic launched to massive appeal, much to the surprise of Blizzard, who had thought there was no way players would want a Classic server. Considering it's sitting at the number 3 most played MMO right now, it's obvious they couldn't have been more wrong. It's impressive that a spin-off version of a 2-decade-old MMO sits this high on the list. But this isn't the only time you'll see that happen today. World of Warcraft Classic was a return to WoW before its controversial additions like excessive cash shop items and the WoW token. World of Warcraft Classic is the classic MMO experience through and through, slower combat and a strict adherence to the trinity of tank, healer, and DPS. People actually have to use crowd control and fear aggroing too many mobs. It's going to be interesting to see how long this nostalgia-fueled trip through Classic WoW can maintain its steam, and how many seasons it will be able to continue to get players to return for. Will we someday see Classic WoW take the route of old school RuneScape and carve its entirely own path, completely forking from retail WoW? I think this is the only way we'll see it hold players' attention for longer periods of time than it's currently able to. However, WoW Classic sitting here at number 3 is further proof that there's a strong appetite for the classic MMO experience, untainted by WoW tokens, microtransactions, and loot crates. Hopefully one of those upcoming MMOs that's being developed right now has the balls to answer the call. Next up, moving up 1 spot to number 2 is old school RuneScape. Once again, climbing up this list as if it's completely unaware that MMOs are supposed to become less popular with age. You can play this on any computer less than 20 years old and your phone. The system requirements are so low that this is probably the most accessible MMO on this list, and I think it owes a lot of its success to that. On top of that, old Old School RuneScape is a game run by the players, with each significant change voted on by the player base. Old School RuneScape launched as a result of the community not loving some of the changes that were made to the game. Retail RuneScape added WoW-like abilities and a massively pay-to-win cash shop, and so the community begged the developers for the creation of Old School RuneScape. Jagex finally caved and agreed to create the servers that were based on the 2007 version of the game. Old School RuneScape is unique because it does not have the player follow a linear storyline, but instead has the player choose their own path through the game. Players can choose to kill monsters, go off questing, or level up one of their many different skills. Old School RuneScape is a make the numbers go up game. You skill up, you level up your crafting, your sword wielding, your fishing, anything you can think of. You can level it up, and a lot of people enjoy doing this. RuneScape is a very sandboxy MMO that allows for a lot of AFK skilling, and thanks to its slow pace and incredibly low computer requirements, it's a very accessible game. It's got some pretty involved quests that would be near impossible to figure out without the help of some add-ons and guides, but it's as old school as it gets, with a very clunky combat system and user interface. It'll take some patience and getting used to if you're going to be trying this one out for the first time. By the numbers, Old School RuneScape has moved up to the #2 slot and is definitely giving the #1 MMO a run for its money. Pretty impressive for being born from a browser game that was released in 2001. And finally, we have World of Warcraft and its War Within expansion regaining the #1 spot. Public opinion of World of Warcraft has massively improved since the self-inflicted wound that was Shadowlands. With the last 2 expansions going over well, World of Warcraft is now 5 years into a bout of player growth, which is remarkable for a 2-decade-old MMO. World of Warcraft is a massive, seamless MMO that still handles scale better than any other MMO I've played. You can see locations multiple zones away and get on your mount and fly to them. It also makes you feel tiny when you walk up to huge structures. These are things that a lot of other MMOs created well after World of Warcraft are still unable to deliver on, thanks to them being broken down into smaller zones with rampant load screens in between. WoW still looks great for 2 reasons. One is thanks to an art style that's aged incredibly well over the years, but perhaps more importantly, the other is that it's had numerous engine overhauls that have kept it feeling somewhat modern despite being 2 decades old. WoW features the trinity of tank, healer, and DPS, and has 13 unique classes, each with multiple different specs. There is loads of single player content for you to level your way up in, as well as dungeons and raids. WoW's dungeons and raids are among the best out there, but definitely be prepared to devote a good chunk of time to them. So what does interest in WoW look like right now? You can see on this graph right now how it absolutely dwarfed the competition in its prime. Looking at its popularity from 2004 to 2012, nothing else even came close. And while it's a long way from its peak, if we zoom in on the last 5 years, we can see that it started to grow again. But it's worth noting, this MMO isn't the untouchable titan that it once was, with Old School RuneScape and Final Fantasy XIV right on its heels, and even passing it from time to time. We have seen some massive upsets to start 2025, with some popular MMOs clawing their way to the top, while others have slid their way to the bottom. In the last 6 months, we've seen multiple MMOs drop absolutely stunning expansions, making it a good time to be a fan of these games. Did any of the results on this list surprise you? Which MMOs do you think are going to move up next time, or down? In the last video, I asked where you guys thought Throne and Liberty would land. Are you surprised it took the 12th spot? Let me know down in the comments below. Be sure to like the video and subscribe if you enjoyed it, as I'll continue to cover MMOs like the degenerate MMO player I am. As always, massive shout out and massive thank you to my YouTube members. To become a member, click the join button down below for access to a private Discord channel and behind the scenes footage and more. Massive shout out to some of the newest members of the community, Ashley Mara, Stuff, and Don Dennison. Sincerely, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. And don't forget to use my Raid Shadow Legends link in the description or scan the QR code to have the most epic start to Raid Shadow Legends possible.